thank you so much for coming to tonight's event with Ann Patchett and Kathy Baker. This is an event that grew, and because my friends, the top brass here at the Ebell, are such Ann Patchett fanatics, we were able to sidle into this fabulous theater. I want to thank these great women at the Ebell for giving us all this opportunity to host Ann and Kathy tonight. And I'll start by saying that after Ann and Kathy come onto the stage, please put your cell phones away. No texting, because it is deeply disturbing to everyone sitting nearby. Thanks, please. I also want to welcome all of you brave men who came. When I say all of you, I mean, what, 3 or 4, however many are in the audience? I saw maybe 3. My brother is one of them, okay? So thank you. Now for tonight. A literary critic recently expressed to me that she's deeply concerned about the state of literary arts in American culture. She worries that people only read political books of the necessarily depressing variety. Looking at this audience, I'd say that's so 4 years ago. And she ought to see all of you here tonight because she'd be really relieved. It's my firm belief that we learn more from fiction than we do from nonfiction, whatever the subject. And no one can illuminate certain aspects of life like Ann Patchett. We're here because we all have our absolute favorite Ann Patchett novel. For many, it's The Dutch House, Commonwealth, Bel Canto, and Tom Lake. I love her books because she reminds me that, as she said in a great essay she wrote not too long ago, that love does not require understanding in order to thrive. She reminds me how anything in life can be absolutely transformative. How one moment or one decision or one action or one discovery can change the very meaning, the trajectory of your life. Invaluable lessons that come from fiction. It's also in the way Ann writes about relationships that keep us going back to that beautiful well, about love in all of its complications with partners, children, siblings, and strangers. She's won enough prestige awards to fill any bookshelf. Well, so has Kathy Baker. Emmy wins and nominations galore for her role in Picket Fences. Screen Actors Guild wins and nominations for other roles, including for Picket Fences and Cider House Rules, to name a few. But what brings her here tonight is her love and appreciation for Ann's books in general, and of course, for Tom Lake. So here's what's going to happen tonight. Ann and Kathy will chat, and when they're through, there will be volunteers standing in each aisle and upstairs as well with mics for some questions. Please make your questions brief. Ann has pre-signed a slew of copies of Tom Lake, and I remind you that the holidays are here. Like, I think Hanukkah is, well, I don't know, it's coming up. That's all I know. Anyway, and Christmas is right after that. Thank you so much, Ann Patchett and Kathy Baker. See, this is the perk of doing writer's block.
They embrace. Hi.
It's so nice to meet you.
It's so exciting to meet you.
We just met backstage.
Okay, but I want to start this, I want to start this by saying a couple of things. I'm thrilled to be here. I am from Los Angeles, and my father was in Wilshire Rotary and was in a glee club, and they used to sing here. They did their Christmas show here. So I've been in this theater when he was here. He was a terrible singer, and they put him in the back, but he loved it so much. So it's very, very nice to be here. But I want to tell you why Kathy and I are doing this together, because it's such a great story. You're a friend of my friend Miley Malloy and Ian Maxtone Graham, and Miley sent me an email from you, and you told me, you had read the book when it came out, that you originated the role of May in Fool for Love with Ed Harris playing Eddie and Sam Shepard directing.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
So we...
A long, long time ago.
So we emailed back and forth, and I so wanted to meet you. This is the great frustration of writing a novel, is that after the novel comes out, you meet exactly the person who you wish you had met while you were writing the novel. And it's fascinating to me that people talk a lot about our town with this book, and they talk a lot about the cherry orchard and Chekhov, and no one talks about Fool for Love. And the book really stands on a tripod of those three plays. So anyway, we started emailing, and I completely fell for you, and I said, would you come and interview me so that I could ask you about Fool for Love and Sam Shepard, because it's so fascinating.
Oh, so you're interviewing me.
That's surprise.
Oh, do they know that?
But no, I really do. I mean, this is where I want to start, because
Yes,
I really,
good.
really do want to know what that was like.
And I want to know how you know so much about the theater and about Fool for Love in the first place, because one of our exchanges, email exchanges, you said you'd never even seen a production of it.
No.
And I mean, can you imagine? You've written it as if you played May.
But I am a novelist, and I just make stuff up. But
You did it pretty well. You did it pretty well.
Being an actress, it's
Yeah.
got to be a very similar sort of thing. You don't have to live that life in order to play the part.
Right, right. Let's hope not. Yeah, yeah.
Like-
Well, this is in 1980. I met Sam Shepard. I was doing a lot of theater at the Magic Theater in San Francisco. Sam used to live in Mill Valley, or Marin County, near San Francisco. And I was living in Larkspur. And I did a couple of his plays, and then we did The Right Stuff. And he came up to me one day and said, "Hey, Kathy, I want to give you a script." Oh my God, I mean, I didn't know him well enough for him to give me a script like I would be the original,
Right.
So I said, "Oh, sure, Sam, that'll be great." And so he sent me, in those days, you had to send me something in the mail, and I read it and I just fell on the floor. I mean, it's such a beautiful play. I think it's his best play. And one reason I think it's his best play, this is a long discussion, but it's the one with the great female character. I don't know if there's another one with a great female character like this. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's truly a two-hander with the actor who plays Eddie. And so then we did it in San Francisco, and we took it to New York. And the reason we took it to New York was that True West had gone to New York, and it went to the I can't remember the name of the theater, but they wanted New York actors, because New York actors, of course, are better than any other actors.
I heard that. They're a lot better.
Yeah,
right.
they're a lot better, and the water is different. There's something. And so Sam, said okay, and they used actor Sam. Well, I'm sorry, but Sam didn't like the show. I'm not going to say he hated the actors, but he didn't care for the show. And so then when we were doing Fool, and Circle Rep wanted us in New York, Sam said, "You're taking my actors no matter what." And we were terrified, because we aren't as good actors as New York actors, and we were going to New York to be terrible in front of all of them. And they liked us a lot.
So I went to Sarah Lawrence in 1981, and so that was the time when I was in college, when all of those Sam Shepard plays were on Broadway, and I didn't have any money, and I never went to any of them. I never went to the theater. I never did. Oh, no. I mean, but it's so weird. I read about it all the time, and I read the plays, and I read theater reviews, and I always thought that was every bit as good as going. But I think that that's sort of my whole relationship to life. I stay home and I read about it.
Yes.
And
then you make things up.
And then I make things up based on what I've read,
right.
and it works.
And we are honored to be able to read what you've made up. It is us who win.
You know, that's very kind. It's so funny because people will read this book and what they will say to me is, well, you must have been an actress.
Yeah.
And I always say, well, that's interesting. You don't say you must have had children because people know that I don't have children. And nobody says you must have been a cherry farmer because they figure that would be too hard, but that maybe I worked some acting in there somewhere. I have a very dear friend named Erin Whiting. And Erin Whiting grew up on a cherry orchard in Traverse City, Michigan, and she also started a professional theater company called Parallel 45 in Traverse City, and she was my go-to. And what you need as a novelist is just one person who you can get all of your facts from. And I would write out lists of questions for her, but when I decided to put Tom Lake, the theater company, in Michigan, and that it was going to be 1988, and I sent Erin a note and said, okay, 1988, what plays would they have been doing? And she said, it would be this in the main stage and this in the black box. And she said in 1988, one of the plays, in a list of about a dozen plays, was Fool for Love. And I thought, what would be the very worst play to be in if you were playing Emily in our town at night? And Erin explained this to me, which I didn't know, that you had to do, as soon as your play opened, you had to be in rehearsals for a different play all day.
Yep.
So it would be so horrific to be May all day and then be Emily at night.
Yeah,
how could you possibly?
Really
it seemed like
hard.
the largest gulf
Yes.
that anyone would have to cover.
Right.
And that's how I decided to do Fool for Love.
Exactly. Well, it's not referenced very often. It doesn't seem to be a play that people know very well.
Go ahead.
Why do you suppose they don't mention Sam Shepard in the reviews?
I have no idea because of when I came up in the world and when I was in school and where I was in school, I was so stone cold in love with Sam Shepard. I mean, Sam Shepard he was just it. And don't you think that was probably a good choice?
Yes.
For a college girl, if you were going to be crazy in love with someone.
Yeah. In fact, I was just saying to my friend today, who do you picture when you picture Duke? And we were trying to name actors that we pictured. You know who?
Who?
Sam Shepard. Right?
Right. 100%. Absolutely, yes.
He even has the funny tooth.
Yes.
Come
yes.
on.
No, I mean, seriously.
Wow.
Right in the center
Am I the
of
only
my heart.
person? Did everybody figure that out already?
Right in the center of my heart, Sam Shepard. So, yeah, it was beautiful. And, gosh.
Thanks for asking me to join you and
I'm
tell my
so
story.
glad that you did.
I have questions.
All right.
I read the review, the book of essays where you were interviewing Tom Hanks, and you told him in the wings that you didn't have any questions, and then he made fun of you.
He did make fun of me. I interviewed Tom Hanks again recently for his novel. He came to Nashville, and it was so much easier the second time because the second time I also didn't have questions, but I realized that I wouldn't talk at all. So we were on stage for 2 hours, and I just did this.
Yeah. Yeah.
for 2 hours, and
Yeah.
it was fantastic. Everybody had a really good time.
Please do that tonight. I mean, please talk. You be Tom.
I can talk.
You be Tom.
I can
I'll
talk
be,
for absolutely all eternity.
Okay.
Is there something you want to
Let's
ask?
see.
Because if not, then I can just start rambling on.
Well, sure. Does it have to be about Tom
No,
Lake?
it can be about anything, actually, anything in the whole world. We can play Stump the Band.
Well, I have a question. I was reading that here we are at writer's block, and you don't believe in writer's block.
I don't believe in writer's block. Yeah, guys, I don't believe in writer's block. And my favorite is every now and then I'll talk to a class of high school students or college students, and they will say always, well, how do you get over writer's block? And then I will explain to them that I don't believe in writer's block, and they're like, yeah, well, it's okay, you've never had it. You just don't understand. I think that sometimes problems are hard. And my husband is a doctor, and he does not get doctor's block. If somebody comes in and he doesn't know what they have, then he runs a lot of tests and he brings in other doctors and they try very hard to figure it out, and sometimes the problem is not solvable. But he doesn't get to say, oh my gosh, I have doctor's block, and so I'm so blocked I can't figure it out. I run into things all the time in writing that are very hard for me to figure out. And sometimes it takes me a year to figure out a problem. And sometimes I never figure out a problem. But it's not because there is some force from the universe that's blocking me. It just seems like a really cheap writer's way of getting out of your responsibilities. So, yeah, it takes time. And you don't put a kernel of corn in the ground one day and eat an ear of corn the next day. It takes time for things to grow. So that's my issue with writer's block.
That's a good life lesson.
It's a sloppy thing, writer's block. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can I have dirty dishes block and making the beds block?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you.
Life responsibility block.
Now, I wanted to say, I think my friend Louisa is in the audience. She's from my book club, and she has 3 daughters, 3 beautiful daughters. And she wonders if the 3 daughters in Tom Lake are based on anybody specific.
Okay, so the thing about 3 daughters, I did not know that was a thing before I wrote the book. If the only people who bought this book were mothers who had 3 daughters or women who had 2 sisters, it would be a national bestseller. There are so many people that I have met on this tour who are one of 3. And I had no idea.
I'm one of 3.
Are you really?
I'm the middle child of 3 daughters.
It's a thing.
You have one sister.
I've got one sister, yeah. So the answer is yes and no. Are they based on anyone? They are in name based on the 3 Todd sisters, Emily, Maisie, and Nell, who were the 3 daughters of Dick and Susan Todd, and Dick Todd was the editor for my first 2 novels, and he would bring me home with him for holidays, and I never wanted to have children except when I was at the Todd's house, because they seemed like the perfect family, and I loved those 3 girls. And so I knew that the oldest daughter would have to be named Emily for Emily in our town. And I have a lot of Nells in my life who I'm very fond of, so I wanted the youngest daughter to be Nell. So if I had an Emily and I had a Nell, then the middle daughter would have to be Maisie.
Maisie.
And so it had a good balance to it. But 3 daughters...
That's a thing.
It's a thing, and it's a wonderful dynamic, and they play off of one another very
well.
well.
It isn't always a wonderful dynamic. Well, that's another story.
It is another story, and I'm like, did you like your sisters? But probably
We're not going to go there.
Probably this is not the moment to talk about your relationship with your sisters.
My dad used to tell us, two of you are beautiful and one of you is smart.
Wow, but did he tell you which was which?
Never.
Wow. So you could just
But we all knew. We knew who he was talking about.
You could all feel anxious all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Although, the worst thing about that equation is it could also be that there was one daughter who was both smart and beautiful.
Well, that's what I thought, because there is one who I thought was smart and beautiful, not me. And I thought, well, wait a minute. She's got two of the things. Well, does that mean I don't have any?
That's right. And then there's one of you that's just a cipher.
Yeah,
just a blank space.
Blank space.
I am a great believer in overpopulating novels. I really like to have a lot of characters. And so I would not be inclined to write about a family that just had one child. Probably I am moving towards books with 6, 7, 8 children. Actually, in Commonwealth, there are 6.
Oh, yeah.
There are 6 children.
Oh, yes.
And there's a ton of pleasure in that. When
That's
I read,
a beautiful
especially
book.
when I read first novels, and they'll be just like, there'll be a couple and they're only children, and they have one child and they have no friends. And I think that's just too easy. You've got to get more people in the mix to make it interesting.
Well, what about the patron saint of liars?
Well, they were at a home. There were so many of those people. They were just waiting, lining up to have babies.
Yeah.
We're going back to my first novel now, which is probably not a great idea.
Oh, I think everybody knows the patron saint. Now, can we go back to, can you talk about the Chekhov influence? Did you finish the book and then go, oh, gosh, there's the cherry orchard, there's 3 sisters, there's the seagull, or did you mean?
I didn't work a seagull in to
no,
the book.
But I think there's a little bit of Nina in there, the actress.
A little bit of Nina. It's really funny because we've already dropped Tom Hanks's name. I can go back to that. But Tom and his wife Rita were in Nashville, and we were having lunch while I was working on this book. Tom Hanks and I have an interesting, multi-layered connection, one of which is his wife, Rita Wilson, is a singer and is many, many other wonderful things, and she writes a lot of songs, and so they are in Nashville a lot, and that is why I see them. But I was in the middle of writing Tom Lake, and they said, oh, tell us about the book, and I was telling them about the book, and that it was on a cherry orchard, and he said, well, what, there are 3 daughters? Are there 3 sisters? And I said, as a matter of fact, yeah, I know, right?
Yes,
that's good.
Yes.
And I said, as a matter of fact, there are 3 sisters. But it was always going to be that. But again, it kind of goes back to college, because at the same time, I was obsessed with Sam Shepard. I was obsessed with Chekhov, because I was a writing student, and that's what you do in college. You read a lot of Chekhov. And I studied with Alan Gurganis, who was such a huge fan of Chekhov. And I was a lifelong Thornton Wilder fan, and I think Our Town is the single piece of literature I've gone back to the most over the course of my life.
Really?
And also that I am a bookstore owner and a bookseller, and what I always have to do, and what I will do at some point this evening, is recommend books, but I can't move forward without telling people what to read. And so if I have a book, I'm always trying to figure out how I can work different recommendations for reading into a book.
Yeah.
And it's really been incredible how many people have said to me, oh, I went back and I read Our Town, or I watched Our Town on YouTube, or I hadn't read it since high school, or people who never had read Our Town, which kind of shocks me.
But I reread it again, and then I remembered I'd forgotten that I did The Skin of Our Teeth.
Oh, I love The Skin of Our Teeth.
Yeah, that's a crazy different whole different thing that
And
he's
that's
writing about.
And that's what's so wonderful about Thornton Wilder. It's like, Our Town is this bedrock piece of Americana, but he wrote some super weird
Yes,
stuff.
he did. Yeah. It's, you probably don't know the skin of our teeth the way you don't know
It's the
Fool for
coldest
Love.
day of the year. The dogs are sticking to the sidewalk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Listen to you.
Well, I say that to my dog every time it snows. Sparky, I'm sorry, it's the coldest day of the year. The dogs are sticking to the sidewalk.
Wow. That's my first line, isn't it?
So when I first had the idea to write this book, I was writing The Dutch House, and that usually is how it works. I get an idea for a novel while I'm writing a novel, which I always think of, this is a great example about how life changes, because when I was first writing novels, when I wrote my first 2 or 3 novels, I would think, oh, the idea that I have is so much better than the book that I'm writing. And it's really like being married and meeting somebody and thinking, wow, you look so much better than this person that I'm with. And I just got a round of applause for that. That was great. And so I made a deal with myself, really, when I was writing my first novel, that I wasn't allowed to leave the novel until I finished it. I wasn't allowed to run off with the hot idea until I finished the boring novel that I was halfway through. Because much like marriage, every hot idea becomes boring. Eventually, you know, we shouldn't take that metaphor too far.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm talking about. And so I had this very small idea while I was writing The Dutch House. What if I wrote a book about a woman whose life had been shaped by playing Emily in Our Town in high school? And so I just had that one idea. And then I was on book tour. And the best part of being on book tour is always when I go to Peterborough, New Hampshire, and I stay with my friend Katrina Kennison, because she has the nicest guest room, and she has a wonderful washer and a dryer, and lets me do my laundry. And I'll do like my Boston event and come home and stay with Katrina, and Concord and come home and stay with Katrina. Anyway, I was with Katrina for a couple of days during book tour, and we were taking a walk in the woods, and she said, "What are you going to write next?" And normally I never talk about an idea until I'm more in it. And I really only had that one sentence. But I said, because I was in Peterborough, New Hampshire, which is where the McDowell colony is, which is where Thornton Wilder at least started writing Our Town, and apparently Peterborough is the town where Our Town is set in his mind. And I said, I want to write a book about a woman who played Emily in high school, and it informed her life. And my friend Katrina stopped, and she got tears in her eyes, and she said, all I ever wanted was to play Emily in high school. Oh. And she said, I was really small, and I got cast as Rebecca, who is George's little sister. And she fell in love with George. And George was super, super hot. And he had a car, and he played the guitar, and things got going with her brother, and then the next season they were in a play together in which they played boyfriend and girlfriend, and they kissed every night, and she said it just set her whole life in motion. And she's telling me this whole story about this guy who came to a really tragic end. And in my mind, it was like click, 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 click. Because suddenly I thought, oh, this is how you get into the story. It's the tragic guy, the super hot guy, and then what becomes of her life. And also the idea of what people actually want, as opposed to what people think we want.
Or what people tell you you should want.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to be a movie star, right? Everybody wants to be an actress. Except,
I guess. I just wanted to be an actress. I didn't ever think I'd be in a movie. So some people just want to do, yeah. Some people just want to do theater. But these days I notice most young people they want to be famous.
yeah.
They want to be an how do I get to be an actress and how can I be famous? Like boom, it just goes boom like that.
And what do you tell them?
I say, go audition for a play. do theater, pay your dues.
And is there a good crossover between those two things?
I don't think so, and I can't figure it out.
Okay, so this is interesting.
Okay,
I
good.
have an extensive and expensive education in writing short stories. All through college and graduate school, I was trained to write short stories, which I did all through college and graduate school. Nobody taught me how to write a novel. Writing short stories does not prepare you to write a novel. I mean, they don't cross nearly as much. And I would think that acting in plays and acting in movies would be a very similar situation.
Yeah, no, I don't understand what it is exactly, but there are many wonderful actresses on stage who it just doesn't translate into film. And I'm not quite sure why, but art.
Art,
right? I mean, how do you explain it?
But, and I do think that Laura's character, she's somebody who, in fact, didn't choose to be an actress.
No, she just wanted to be Emily.
Right, she just wanted to be Emily.
Yeah, and you know what I love? I love the marriage. And you don't read about a very good marriage very often. A really good, loving marriage where they get each other and they work hard and they help each other. And they love, how you they love each other first and then they love the 3 daughters.
Yeah.
And I think it's often the other way around.
And
that you love the kids first and then your husband.
Yes. My gosh. My contractor came over because I need a new roof. And he was telling me that both of his children left for college the same year. You guys don't know my contractor, and don't tell him that I'm telling you this story. They left the same year because his son had to stay home for a year. And he and his wife, for the first time, they went from having 2 kids to having no kids. And he was like, wow, it's not great. This is my life. My life is that the person who's coming over to put a new roof on my house tells me about their marriage.
Oh, really?
I am that person.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. I'd like to discuss mine with you. Could I, right now?
I would be very, very happy to know. I went out to lunch last week, and the waiter came to my table, and I said, "How are you?" And he said, "I am fantastic." And I said, "Why?" And he said, 3 reasons. First, I've saved up $185, and I'm going to get to enroll in an acting class that I'm very excited about. Second, I'm taking my 14-year-old son to Washington in February, and we're really excited about that because we had a camping trip together last week, and it went well, and I'm trying to keep that momentum going. But the third thing is that in 18 days, I'm going to get to see a new therapist because my old therapist quit. And I thought, this is exactly who I am in the world. That light shines on me, and people say, I'm going to tell you everything.
Yeah.
And actually, I really want to know.
I think it's because when he said he was fantastic, and you didn't just say, "Oh, okay, I'll have the pancakes." You said, "Why?"
Sure.
Well, not everybody would do that.
But I am interested.
Yeah, so
I am actually really...
You can feel that.
I find people very interesting. And I don't have to get far away from my front door on any given day for everyone to tell me absolutely. And people know I'm a novelist too, which that's really strange. But people do want to share. And I actually believe that my friend Patty always calls me a scary listener. And she'll call me and she'll talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and then she'll say, "Are you still there?" And I'll say, "Yes." And she'll say, "Why aren't you saying anything?" And I'll say, "Because you're talking." It's called listening. And she said, "It's terrifying the way you listen to people."
But you know, you said it in the book. You said, oh shoot, you said in the very beginning that Laura realizes that the trick to acting is listening. And that's the trick.
The trick to everything, the trick to everything is listening. And I also really believe it's a huge gift. It's a huge gift, guys. Just go up to somebody and ask them about what they care about. It's the greatest thing you can do, to be genuinely interested in what someone else does. When I was writing State of Wonder, somebody told me that the great malarial program in this country was at Bethesda Naval Hospital, and they gave me the name of the guy who was the head malarialist. And I emailed this person and I said, "I'm really interested in malaria. Could I come up and talk to you for a day?" And he said yes. And I brought my husband with me, who's a doctor. I don't think this guy had any idea what I did for a living. He was so excited to know that somebody was interested in mosquitoes and somebody was interested in his work, just not as a doctor. And he let me walk around behind him all day and ask him questions. And he was glowing. And I thought, this is really all I want to do. It's the nicest thing about my job. I know so much about stone fruit. I know so much about orchards and trees and theater schedules and acting and opera and malaria and ichthyology. Can you imagine having a career where you could just glom on to one thing? It would be very much like being an actress.
Yes.
And to go, boy, this is weird, to go back to Tom Hanks. And when I interviewed him that first time on stage, and I said, "It seems so strange to me that you're writing fiction because it's so solitary and still and quiet, and acting seems to be so outward and public and interactive." And he said, "No, because it's actually the same thing. It's all about developing character."
Yeah, I would agree.
And that opened a door, actually, probably that I ended up walking through for writing Tom Lake, because it was a way that I could then understand how writing and acting were connected. If I could do my education over again, I would take nothing but acting classes.
Really?
Yeah.
And you've never taken an acting
I've never
class?
taken an acting class.
You've never been on stage?
No.
You didn't know anything about summer stock? Or
No.
How? It's astounding.
Nothing.
Really.
Absolutely nothing. But acting, in terms of preparing characters, and also for doing this, and also for just being alive in the world, I would think that acting would be the handiest skill you could possibly have. No, I'm dead serious.
It works with my little granddaughter. It works very well with her.
That you can do all the parts of the story?
Well, that I can kind of manipulate her, you know?
Acting, it's manipulation. It's so handy.
It can be.
Yeah.
Okay, you said something about research. You said, I wanted to ask you this. May I quote you?
Sure.
"I raise the bar with every book I write, making sure I'm doing something that is uncomfortably beyond what I can manage." What was uncomfortably beyond what you could manage in Tom Lake?
That there are two different storylines. And the thing is, when you write a book with two storylines, inevitably the reader likes one better than the other. And so you're reading one more quickly, or you're reading one in a sort of an irritated state of like, come on, I want to get to the part that I really like. And so the thing that was the trick in this book is, how do you braid them? How do I braid them in a way so that the reader reads at the same rate of speed, so that the reader hopefully is as interested in the story of Laura and Duke as they are in the story of Laura and Joe, and that they don't put one in front of the other. And the way that I did that is by making the daughters interrupt. Because I own a bookstore, I know things about children's books, which I never ever knew before. And there's a wonderful children's book called Interrupting Chicken, in which there is a big chicken who's reading a story to a little chicken, and the little chicken keeps interrupting and jumping to the end and making the wrong conclusion. And that's where I learned. I learned from Interrupting Chicken how to make those things go together. I'm looking at my watch.
Can I ask you one more?
Ask me one more question, and then we'll let them ask a question.
My friend Donna, who's also in my book club, my book club is well represented here tonight.
Hi, Donna.
Thank you. Wants to know how did you get Meryl Streep to?
Oh, that's a really good question. Speaking of actresses.
Good question, Donna.
Thanks, Donna. I asked her. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been a lovely night. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, I asked you to do this, right? My confidence level was way up from having asked Tom to read The Dutch House, and he was like, yeah, okay. So about 15 years ago, there was a period of around 7 hours where it seemed vaguely possible that Meryl Streep might play Roxanne Koss in the movie of Bel Canto. Oh. And we had lunch, and it didn't work out. No fault of Meryl Streep's and no fault of mine, the fault of some other people. And it was a memorable lunch. So we had not stayed in touch, but I believed that she would remember. Mm-hmm. And because Meryl has 3 daughters, and her voice had been in my head, which is no big deal because her voice is in everyone's head. And my agent is Felicity Blunt, sister of Emily Blunt, wife of Stanley Tucci, who played Meryl's husband in Julie and Julia.
That's how it works in Hollywood,
That's
folks.
how it works, right? So I emailed Felicity and I said, if I wrote Meryl an email, would you forward it to her? And she wrote back and said, no, but here's her email. And so I wrote an email that was 3 sentences long. I boiled the book down to 3 sentences. This is what it's about. Really hope that you might do this. And she wrote back and said, sure, I'd love to. And I said, don't you want to read the book? And she said, I've read your other books. I'll do this. It'll be fun. She said, thank you so much for thinking of me. And I was like, oh, please. Like we ever have thought of anybody else. Yeah. And it's been really miraculous. It's such a phenomenal performance.
It is.
And
it is.
Yeah, Meryl Streep. And when people say, oh, I listened to the book, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you listened to it instead of reading it. And they say, oh, you're being so self-effacing. And I'm like, it's not self-effacing at all. Here is my talent. Here is Meryl Streep's talent on top of my talent. You're getting
a
double.
Sandwich.
You're definitely getting a talent sandwich.
Yeah.
It's exponentially so much better. Mm. And also, one thing that has been lovely is I meet a lot of people out on tour who say, I listened to the book and I really loved it, therefore I am buying the book.
Yes, that's
Or the other way around.
Yeah.
I read the book and then people told me that Meryl's performance was so great, now I'm listening to the book.
Yeah.
And that actually is very good for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Donna. That's
yes.
Excellent question.
Are
we supposed to be taking
I think that
audience?
now we can get questions from those of you who are out there, and because
I can't see
we
thing.
cannot see a thing. Wait!
Oh, look at all those
Hi!
people.
Hi!
Oh, here we go.
This is great. Excellent. I had no idea. For all I knew, it was just the two of us rambling on.
So here are mics. Everybody there. Oh, yep. Lena's over there, raising her hand, and we're over here.
Okay, so and because I cannot really see...
You have to come and stand over here in line.
I can run. I'll run the mic. I'll run the mic to you. Are we standing in line?
I have no idea if people are lining up to ask questions or fleeing the theater. It could be either one. And no judgment either way.
Folks, just so you know, you'll go to the aisles. The person that's will hand the mic to you. I also have somebody in the balcony. And then from the stage, they'll call which side they're going to.
We'll start here. Thank you.
Hi, I've read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she talks about the story with State of Wonder, and I was curious about it from your perspective.
Yes, so...
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't get the question.
Actually, I'll repeat the question.
Thank you.
How about that? So, Liz Gilbert wrote a book called Big Magic, which is a terrific book about living a creative life. It's a book that I recommend to people all the time. But in the book, she tells a story which I told for a long time before she wrote that book. We both told that story. When Liz and I first met, and it was probably 2002. It was at an American Library conference. We were speaking together on a panel at a librarians convention, and we had a really good time for a whole host of reasons. And at the end of the evening, when we were saying goodbye to one another, we kissed. And then we stayed in touch. And I'm trying to get this right. I told her I was writing a book that was set in South America, and it was about science and malaria. And it turns out that she had been writing a book that had begun in Minnesota and then went to South America. And it was about a scientist who goes missing, and a woman is dispatched from Minnesota to go and find the scientist. It was the same book. And what she said was that she had been writing that book, but that she had then abandoned the project because something else had come up. The idea got tired of waiting for her to come back to it, and the night we met and kissed, the idea was transferred to me. Which makes the kiss sound slightly more interesting than it was. But also that I was the idea's second choice. And where do Liz Gilbert's old ideas go to when they're tired of waiting for her to get around to them? They come to me. And it's an entirely true story, because we were having lunch, it was maybe 2 years later, and she said, "Tell me about your South American missing scientist story from Minnesota." And I said, "Wait, no, you tell me yours first." And she did, and it was the plot to State of Wonder. And I said, either that's the most boring plot that anybody would have come up with, or there really is something going on. So when she was writing Big Magic, she asked if she could put that story in the book, and I said yes. And it's really funny, because Liz probably does believe in writer's block. Liz is kind of more connected to the spiritual cosmos than I am, and probably more so than all of us here put together are. She's a brilliant, wonderful, hardworking person who believes that ideas are transferred through kisses. I believe more in coincidence, but that is a heck of a coincidence that we both came up with the same story. Yeah, but I love that story.
Hi.
Hi.
I love your Instagram feed.
Oh, thank you.
And because of your Instagram feed, I downloaded, because it was the only way I could get it, The English Understand Wool.
Yes.
And I loved it.
Yes.
And decided to buy it for my book club.
Yes.
Only nobody
It doesn't
seems-
exist.
Right.
Right.
I've got my local bookstore
Right.
on the trail.
Can I tell this story?
Please.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, so there are lots of weird things about me. One of them is I don't use a cell phone and I'm not on social media of any form. I've actually never seen Facebook and I've never texted. I don't watch television either. But I write lots of books. My bookstore has a big social media presence, and they tell me where to stand, and I talk, but I've never seen it. So on Tuesdays, we do the Laydown Diaries, and we talk about the books that are coming out on Tuesday. I had a business partner who retired a year and a half ago, and she wasn't into backlist. And so as soon as she retired, I started a series called New to You, because if you haven't read this book, it's new to you, in which I promote backlist books. I had gotten a copy of a book called The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt, which is put out by New Directions. It looks exactly like a little golden book. It's a tiny, looks like a little children's book, 70 pages. It's the strangest, most fantastic book. And I picked it up on book tour at 3 Lives in the West Village in New York. And when I got home, I did a video about it. And it's sold out all across the country. And there aren't any more of them. And because it is such a beautiful and strange packaging, they couldn't go back to press on it quickly. What is super weird about this story is that I was making dinner a week ago, and I turned the radio on, and I was on the radio. NPR was doing a story about how Ann Patchett wiped out the stock of The English Understand Wool, and that everybody's frantically going around. And they didn't interview me, they just played the clip of my talking about it on the video. And they interviewed Helen DeWitt, who's living in Berlin, and she's saying, well, it seems Ann Patchett liked the book quite a bit. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it makes me feel really powerful, like a 14-year-old girl who's pushing mascara on Instagram. I am an influencer for literary fiction. Yeah. And to that end, this is also really funny, especially when I'm on book tour. I bank those videos. Like, I'll make 2 or 3 when I'm home, but then I don't ever know which one Sarah from the bookstore is putting up. So the book that I am obsessed with right now is called This Is Happiness by Niall Williams, that came out in 2019. Is it the best book ever? I have not, I think I've only done this twice in my adult life. I got to the end of This Is Happiness, and I flipped it over and I read it again. And it's not a short book, but I didn't know where to go. I had to just read it again. I only tell you that because go ahead, get your copy now. Because next week, This Is Happiness isn't going to be available. I also wiped out Barbara Trapito's brother of the more famous Jack. Gone. Forget it. Next year, if you're lucky. Okay.
My grandchildren and I adore Landslide and
Hey.
The Scapegoat.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you'd just say a little bit about how you happened to write those books.
I would be especially happy to say a little something about how I wrote that book, because my most beloved friend, Robin Price Glasser, famous illustrator of the juggernaut known as the Fancy Nancy series, is right there. And this is why it's a great thing to own a bookstore, because I was in the bookstore one morning and Robin came in for Fancy Nancy, Oodles of Kittens, which I will never get tired of saying. And she was a fan of my novels, and she asked me if I would ever be interested in writing a picture book that she would illustrate, that we would work on together. And I said, I don't know how to write a picture book. And she was like, sit down, let me show you. And she did, and I was like, I could do that. And I did, and I love Robin Price Glasser so much that I just want to write picture books so that we can be on the phone all the time and so that we can go on book tour together. I have no interest in writing picture books. I only have interest in working with Robin. And we have an amazing book coming out in September called The Verts. And The Verts is the story of a family who have two children, Ivan Vert and Esty Vert. And Ivan is Ivan and Esty is Esty, and neither is right and neither is wrong, but Ivan is under the couch with his goldfish, Mr. Limpet, reading a book under an Afghan with a flashlight, and Esty is arranging a conga line with all the people in the apartment building. And during the pandemic, there were a lot of conversations about the introverts and the extroverts, and Robin puts the extra in extrovert, and I put the inter in introvert. And everybody had that conversation, like the rise of the introverts. And I hope that the verts become huge and we can just do a whole series about introverts and extroverts. And if that doesn't work, and actually this is very funny too, because after I wrote Landslide and a Scapegoat, and Robin dutifully illustrated them, and then it was time to do another book, and I called her and I was like, what do you want to do next time? And she was like, well, no more animals. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? What do you want? And she was like, children? So we got rid of the sheep and the goats, and we went to the children. And it's been nothing but a joy. But boy, oh boy, am I glad you asked. Thank you. Yeah.
So actually picking up on the theme of children, in so many of your books, they're wonderful children, whether it be Run, Patron Saint of Liars, or even in Tom Lake are these three sisters. So I have a two-parter. One is, have you ever thought of revisiting any of these characters later on?
Okay,
because I think a lot of us want to know what happens to all these wonderful characters.
Right,
later.
I have no interest at all.
Okay.
So the first half of the question is, do I have any interest in revisiting any of these characters? Okay. Zero.
So that
because this is the way literary fiction works. You bring half and I bring half. It's like love. The thing about commercial fiction, and commercial fiction is fantastic. Commercial fiction puts you in the car and drives you there. And if you like a John Grisham novel, you like a Stephen King novel, you're going to have pretty much the same experience as the other person who likes the John Grisham novel and the Stephen King novel. But if you read The Fraud by Zadie Smith, right? And you should, because it's good. But one person may love that book, while another person may not love that book, because you're bringing half and I'm bringing half, and you're going to meet in the middle, and you're going to have chemistry with the book. But a book needs to end at the point where you have enough information that the characters now belong to you, and you write the sequel. You imagine their lives. The character I get this the most about is Easter in State of Wonder. What happened to Easter? Can't he come back? He needs to be reunited with her. He needs to be stolen from his parents a second time to be back with these people. You figure it out. Not interested in that kid anymore. Okay.
So and the second part of the question.
And the second half of your question?
The second half of my question is, in my book club, we kept texting about, especially I did listen to it with Meryl Streep, she was amazing, is who would play who in what we are hoping is the 7-part HBO miniseries. So that the whole book, so do you ever think about that? Like who
plays who in the movie?
Who plays who in the movie? Or
no.
I want a miniseries because I want it all. So I don't want a movie. I'm hoping Tell Felicity you want a mini-series.
I'll
not a
call
movie.
Felicity.
Yeah.
She'll get on it. Yeah, no, I don't. Or the people that I have in mind, by the time the book comes out, they're all way too old for the parts. They've aged out of everything. Or they're dead, because honestly, Sam Shepard, Duke, and Sam Shepard in Days of Heaven, that's Sam Shepard, is Duke. Where does that get me? Nowhere. Anything going on in the balcony? Are you guys okay up there?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much for sharing so much of yourself with us tonight and in your writings.
There's a person up in the balcony waving.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yes, there is a person on the balcony waving. All right, go ahead.
I have two questions about Tom Lake. One is, why did you have Peter Duke drowned? Was it a suicide, or
Wait,
was
sorry.
it just?
Oh. Okay, let's just let's forget that. Okay, wait. Let me just ask you. The second part of the question is something that is also a spoiler?
Oh. Well, I assume everyone's.
No, they obviously have not. No, they haven't.
Oh dear.
Don't.
All right. Well, I won't spoil the next. The next question is.
No. Okay, but if there's a question that isn't a spoiler, you're welcome to ask it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Why did you choose our town of all the different plays that you could have? There must be a connection that
It's
you
my
felt.
favorite play. It's my favorite play. Tavia Cathcart, my best friend from childhood, her father was a high school drama teacher, and he put it on at McGavick High School when we were 9. Tavia was an extra. I read it for the first time when I was 14. I am going to be 60 the day after tomorrow, and I have been, I have been reading Our Town at least once a year. It's just my touchstone.
Well,
it's
because
my Americana.
It really actually connects in a sense, in a broad sense, with the family in the book. So
Yeah.
I thought you had thought that.
Thank you. I want to check in with the balcony.
Here we are in the balcony.
Hi.
Hi, Ann. Thank you so much. This is such a joy. My best girlfriend and I, we're planning a road trip to Nashville to visit your bookstore. How do we best plan to run into you at the bookstore?
You're not the first. People with book clubs come a lot, and I am pretty much always there on Tuesday mornings because that's when we do the laydown diaries. But you can also just email and say, I'm coming, could you ask? Because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I'm there a lot. Although often I'm in the back hiding, and they won't tell you that. So just email in advance when you know you're coming. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, have fun. Thanks for coming.
Hi. I hope this question makes sense. I think it will. When you're writing your novels and you're developing your characters, do you visualize them first? Do you give them a voice? And as you develop and continue to write the book, you have so many characters. They all have separate voices. When I read your books, they have voices in my head. They're individuals. What's that like for you? What comes first? And then how do you keep it straight?
Keeping it straight is no problem. I mean, in the same way that if you made 6 new friends, you'd be able to keep them straight, right? I mean, and you just put it together over time. I might not remember your name the first time you tell me, but the second time you tell me, I will, and then I'll ask you if you have any sisters, and then we'll have lunch and I'll find out you're lactose intolerant. And, and I might remember when your birthday is, and then I'll ask you again and you'll introduce me to your partner. And, it's just bit by bit by bit. It's exactly like meeting people in your life, and you put them together and you make them up.
But do they look like something when you start, and do they sound like something before you start, or that comes after over time?
No, they don't. They don't necessarily look like anything or sound like anything all the way through.
All right, folks, we're going to only have time for 2 more questions, so let's start on this. Okay.
Make them good.
Pressure. I love your, if you haven't read this book, it's new to you. Love those, watch them every week.
Thank
you. And I'm
you.
wondering, as a reader, do you finish every book you start? And if not, do you feel guilty?
That's adorable. If not, do I what?
Do you feel
I
guilty?
feel guilty? Okay, one, I feel guilty about nothing. And I own a bookstore. Everyone who publishes a book in this country wants me to read it. They want me to blurb it. They want me to hold it up and promote it. I get anywhere from 1 to 5 books a day. My neighbors all think I'm having an affair with the UPS man. It's endless. No. If I even properly opened every book that was sent to me, I wouldn't have time to eat. You know, it's one of those, you know how sometimes a problem gets so much worse it gets better? That, you know, you just go over that tipping point and you're like, forget it. And I pass judgment on books really quickly. It's not that I pass judgment and think that they are bad, but I know what is for me and what is not for me. And what blows my mind is when I say to somebody, yeah, I started that book, but I didn't finish it. And they're like, oh, it was so good. I really kicked in about page 100. And I'm like, what do I care about a book that kicks in at page 100? There's a book that I just read. This is the problem of my life, because the books that and I need to have a moment where I just recommend books really fast. I read books that aren't going to come out for 5 or 6 months. There's a book coming out in June called Sandwich by Catherine Newman. If you can possibly file that away in the back of your brain. It's a little tiny book. That book, from the first sentence, I was never going to put that book down. And that's what I want out of a book. I really want a book that has me from hello. I don't want a book with a slow start. And if people who read books they don't like, why? The book police are going to come and shake you down? I don't know. So there's the answer. All right. Ask me a question and then I will recommend books.
All right. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for doing this. I wanted to ask you from a writing standpoint, what is your process for editing and revision? And I don't mean how to do it.
No, I know.
mean how do you do it?
How do I do it?
And how long do you allow for it?
Right. And I don't do it the way a lot of other people do it. I edit chapter 1. And when I finish editing chapter 1, I start chapter 2. And when I get to the end of the book is very, very close to the book you are going to read. I don't get to the end of the book and then think, you know what, if this was in Australia and there were 5 sisters, let me try that. I don't do that. I really edit as I go along. And almost paragraph to paragraph. A book about writing that I love is Stephen King's book on writing, which if you're going to read it, listen to the audio. It's spectacular. And he says, he's got this whole thing about you finish a book, you wait for 14 days, then you ask your wife to read it, and then you wait 3 weeks, and then you go back and you work for 10 days, and then you get your next reader to read. I mean, he's got a real schedule. This is the way you do it. And he said, you know, nobody edits as they go along except Kurt Vonnegut and Ann Patchett. So that's it. It's a really efficient way to work, and I recommend it. All right, books. My favorite novel of the year, which I have not seen show up on any year-end best list, I do not understand this, is Absolution by Alice McDermott. Love that book. Feel like that book should be the big winner of the year. I also adored James McBride, Heaven and Earth Grocery. Yes.
Will you tell him to come to Writer's Block?
Jim?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And you do have to believe in Writer's Block. After tonight, you do believe in Writer's Block?
I believe in the organization. Okay. Absolutely. I believe in the and if that was the question, I'm sorry. I do believe in the organization of Writer's Block. Claire Didier, Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma. Please, please read that book. I bought 35 copies of that book and gave it to every single person who works at Parnassus, because it is about what do we do with the art that we love when we find out we no longer love the artist. And she doesn't give us the answers, but it is an amazing book. Margaret Rankel's The Comfort of Crows, My Backyard Year. That is the book you want to give to everyone you know as a gift. It is a gorgeous book, but it's not only what is happening in the natural world, but what's happening around the world. There were books that came out that were just woefully overlooked. Fiona McFarlane, The Sun Walks Down, was a book that I loved. Maggie Smith's You Could Make This Place Beautiful, a wonderful memoir about divorce and also about the importance of living with poetry. Some books to keep an eye out for next year. Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, who is a poet, and this is his first novel. Spectacular. Tommy Orange's Wandering Stars, which is the follow-up to There, There. It is better than There. And the book that will, I believe, change the world in 2024, Percival Everett's James. Hey, really? Have you read it already? Oh, you just love Percival Everett? I love Percival Everett. But this book, oh my God, it is the retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the point of view of Jim. And it turns the world on its head. It is a spectacular, important book. And I can do this all night.
What about your next book?
Yeah, what about it? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. Right now, I'm just on book tour, signing my name. Is it time for us to leave?
If you have more book recommendations, I know everybody wants to hear. Whoops.
Yes. I'm just kind of going through what we just did at the Dog and Pony. We do this for the holidays. I did really love Tom Hanks's book, The Making of Another Motion Picture Masterpiece, which I thought got terribly short shrift because
he was here.
I know, yeah. Because he's a movie star and people think movie stars shouldn't write novels, but I thought it was a wildly entertaining novel. Elizabeth McCracken's The Hero of This Book, which came out this year, was a book that I loved. And I am probably going to wait until I get in the car and then bash my head against the window and think, why didn't I tell them? But you could just watch the videos. Parnassus Books has a YouTube channel now, so you can go and watch me recommending books on an endless loop. But let me say that if I recommend a book that you want to read, buy it from your local independent bookstore, not my local independent bookstore.
Thank you so much, Ann and
Thank
Kathy.
you, and thank you for doing this. I loved being with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love being in LA. Thank you for coming.
Signed copies of Tom Lake are in the lobby.